because the recruitment level, I looked across, there were a friend of mine's a Big Ten coach, and there are Big Ten coaches there, they're all that, and, he's sending me a text going, I can show you it. 8th grade, question mark, whoa.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they're on the radar. So your hope is that you keep them in the state, but the problem is it's tough to keep them in the state when their radar is where it is right now.
Yeah.
So, you hope that they do.
Well, and here's the thing. Somebody worked really hard to get there as an 8th grader. And, I always get a parental, I've had this before where, should they be playing as an 8th grader? You know what? If they're the best, they should be playing.
Without question. Yeah, without question. You got a challenge. Moments ago, Dan Michaels and Tasha and Doug on the KFGO Morning Show had Jeff Boschian. He just took a job at Pittsburgh State from Missouri Southern, so congratulations to Jeff. And talking to his coaches, at Valley City, Jeff was very good at a young age, too. So how do you challenge those to increase their ability, like you did, like I did. You played against people that were older, and that's kind of how you iron sharpened iron. You got better. I had coaches that with Bosch, you just had to pick him up and let him play against the college guys or the high school guys at a very young age just to keep him sharp. So these 8th graders are playing at a very high level.
I was the MC, and don't think that they get too big for their britches, because I was the MC the night that Jeff Boschie went into the North Dakota Sports Hall of Fame, which, by the way, stop by the Jamestown Civic Center.
Nice,
it's beautiful. You owe it to yourself if you love any level of athletics. But Jeff, it was a really emotional night for him.
Yeah.
And so he didn't forget from where he came.
Loves his state, loves his town.
I love that about Jeff. It was a great night. It really was.
That was a good get this morning on Jeff's, who took that job at Pittsburgh State. So nice for him. Kim Anderson was a coach there. He retired, which is so 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Kim's son, Ryan, I roomed with because he was working with NDSU at times. It all comes full circle.
Abby dated Kevin Bacon's son.
Really?
Yeah, I did.
Really?
His name was Steve.
Steve Bacon.
Yep.
But they called him Crispy.
Yep.
Just think if
kind of like a wavy mustache.
Just think if Kevin Bacon's daughter married Ralph Nader, Baconator. It's in there somewhere. It sounds like, speaking of, brought us back to the fast food talk. Baconator.
That's Wendy's. The family that owned Krispy Kreme donuts.
Bacon cream donut?
Yeah.
I don't get the marriage.
I'll have my bacon crispy.
When we were at Burger King this weekend on a Saturday evening, my sister-in-law was with me, and she asked for the cashier person and said, which one is worse, the Whopper or the double whatever?
That's how she asked?
Yes. Which one is worse? And he looked really confused, and he was like,
getting at here?
I don't know. And she's like, okay, I'll get the double whatever.
Yeah. Which one?
What did she mean by that?
Like calories intake?
I don't know
or
how she, like,
is that what she was getting? Like
she
calorie
thought it was
intake,
all going to be bad, so which one is the worst?
Like, which maybe worse,
like worse for you for like,
or
I'm sure.
Size?
See, now that's the difference between your sister-in-law and Jack and I.
Yeah, that doesn't come out.
We'd look at it and say, do you have 3 of those ready?
Yeah.
Right.
Or like both. Which one is more likely to cause a heart attack?
Saturday night, try getting through a fast food drive-through in Bismarck, North Dakota on a tournament weekend.
Oh, boy.
In fact, to such a degree, I looked at my clock and it was 10:57. I turned left at a supermarket that rhymes with Nan's Supermarket. Dan's. Anyway.
Dan's.
And I pulled out front. There's 2 cars. I'm thinking, there is no way this place is open. And it closed at 11. And the dude was ready to close the door. I said, can I just come in and get something? So I raced to the deli, grabbed a brown salad, which I'm sure had been there since the
time was
Carter
it?
administration. 10:57. It closed at 11. And so I grabbed a brown salad, 2 chuck wagon sandwiches, mild cheese dip, and plain Tostitas. Then thanked the cashier and said, I'm out of here.
You threw a little extra in his hat.
That's right.
Did you buy it in a panic? Were you just running around grabbing stuff? Or is that what you would have chose?
You ever see the shopping thing when they have the shopping spree and they just let someone, go, and they take off?
Don't you guys, you two are fans of the food. Don't they do that in the Food Channel?
They do. They have grocery games.
They give them X amount of time to get what they're going to make.
That was me. The problem with that salad you get at a supermarket, so has the built-in ranch cup in there. Never enough.
Did you eat both chuck wagons?
I had one that night while I watched Forensic Files late at night, and then I got back to the station yesterday, and then I had it. And
We used to call those
here.
armpit burgers. You want to heat them up, you put them under your armpit for.
Well, that just took the life right out of my chuck wagon.
All right.
Okay, everybody.
And with that, enjoy your breakfast. We'll be back with more Jack Michaels.
Sandwich in the
No. What
I would never trust them, actually.
It's no different than I will eat potato salad, but I won't eat egg salad sandwich. So I'm a complete hypocrite.
Yeah, well,
because
still.
Potato salad has.
How many listeners have been waiting for you to say that?
It's your, not the guy at the C-store.
I'm not going to you and
Not
Crispy
Jim.
Bacon's wedding.
But your palate is your palate.
Your palate
so
is
you're
palate.
entitled to that.
No, but I mean, if you. The other thing is that the lady behind the deli or the guy behind the deli, I always ask the same question about the potato salad, right? Which is, are there onions in it? Because I'll eat fried onions. I'll eat onion rings, but I don't want raw onions in my potato salad.
I wrestle because I love an egg salad sandwich, but I wrestle with the pre-packaged ones.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm not a born. I don't look at the born. It's not a born on date. I guess that's a Budweiser thing. But I don't know when it was made.
Here's the bad part about that too. The package ends up with all that mayonnaise kind of,
grouped together
in the side of your car, and that little it
doesn't deter me from
3
purchasing.
weeks later it smells really
Right.
bad.
It doesn't deter me from buying it. flicking it around until it finds a spot.
Until that thing gets
it kind
tight.
of works.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not trying to criticize you.
Yeah.
But if you're the sports director,
did I miss an event?
then cover sports.
Did I miss an event?
If you were in Wapaton yesterday
I
at the
missed
event
an
center,
event. Oh.
you would have been there for the big event. You would have been. I'd play the clip of my grandkids screaming and hollering. What? Listen to the slap. It's coming. Here it comes. Watch. Oh,
right in the sternum.
That one was bad, Rusty.
Those guys aren't getting along at all.
You know, for my granddaughter Tenley, she kept looking over at me and going, "This isn't real." And my grandson Reed rushed the stage.
Right?
Yeah. And Lola sat there with her arms crossed going, "Can I just get to piano lessons?"
Yeah.
So we had like
fun. We had a lot of fun.
AWA or one of those type of events.
Paulie Lines from our
Paulie's
team.
oh,
was the
yeah.
MC.
Oh, sure.
Yep. And then Joey Deutsch was there being the bad guy, the bad manager. He walked around with a golf club.
A golf club.
And then the very last match, and I'm not giving anything away. The very last match, there was a guy named The System taking on, I don't know what the other guy's
System.
name. But The System was the bad guy with a fiddle.
Oh, he's
right?
the heel.
Yeah, he's the bad guy. And then Joey, right at the end, when The System was about to get beat, runs under the bottom rope and hits the other guy with the golf club.
Oh, across the back.
Drops him, and the ref doesn't see it, and then The System pins him. And I can tell you this, my grandson Reed did some things that you should be disciplined for.
Well, I've already. Is this the same?
Yeah,
Reed?
this is the adjuster. Yeah,
Was it
the
a
adjuster?
pitching wedge, 7-iron?
It looked to me like a 7-iron, which, by the way, what can't you use a 7-iron for?
Oh, that's
Putting,
Yeah.
pitching. I mean, the edge of the green. A 7-iron's the most universal club. And
The first
obviously,
club I learned to swing.
you can hit a wrestler with it, too. Because it happened yesterday at the Wapaton Event Center.
got all the shots.
Boy. What a
He
nice,
made it a par one.
what a nice casual Lenten season.
It's like, all I kept thinking, you guys, because I was like, possessed. I got to take my 3 oldest grandkids to this. All I kept thinking as it went on and on was, oh boy, are their parents going to be ticked when I get back home? They start rolling on the ground.
I'm trying to think. I think we had that come to Williston one time too, where for the first time I saw another man hit another man with a chair.
You guys, I'm not kidding. This was packed. I mean, it was.
Look at the crowd. I saw
They
it.
will be coming back. If I'm them, I'm looking at it going, hey. And then you could hear them in back getting. I was by the curtain going, hey, pass me a beer. It isn't like they're enemies behind the curtain.
So you have The System. Remember years we had Jesse the Body Ventura. We had all these names. What would like our group's wrestling names be? Like Don Haney. What would Don?
Mighty.
What would Don's wrestling name?
Don's wrestling name?
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's hard.
That's hard.
Or like Tasha. Tasha's got, she's got some experience there. I don't know if in that ring, but
Superfly, that's already taken.
Superfly is
That's
taken. So Don Superfly
It'd have
Haney.
to rhyme with Haney. It'd have to have a fellow H.
Oh, boy.
Well, he spent time in Thief River.
Halsey Haney. I don't
Heavy
know what
hitter
it is.
Haney.
Oh, that'd be close.
Don the Prowler Haney.
the Prowler would be good.
He liked that one.
The Prowler.
The Prowler.
Prowler. Next, he gathers news.
Right.
And,
I mean, he's out there.
The Prowler.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'd be a mask, like have a mask on.
Oh,
or
yeah,
the
that'd be
Prowler.
good. That'd be good.
Breaking.
Tom Szymanski. What would Tom's wrestling?
Tom the Timber.
Timber Tom. Timber Tom and Don the
Timber, when you
Prowler
knock him
Haney.
down, somebody in the back. Timber! All of a sudden,
Down he goes.
Oh, that's
He
right.
would have a golf club with him.
He was.
Yeah,
That's his
yes, he
weapon of
was.
choice.
He would.
how about people are already selling in
How about
Hellcat Haney,
Hellcat
Handicapped Haney,
Just
Haney the Hammer.
Haney.
The Hammer.
Oh.
I'd have to
Hammer.
say that one's the best so far. Haney the Hammer.
Haney the Hammer.
Haney. I suppose
Bring the pain.
I suppose they're talking about bringing pain.
Bringing pain.
We'd have to have Don be in those really, Mad Dog Vachon type.
the Koloff brothers.
I tried teaching my grandkids yesterday Baron von Raschke's claw.
Oh, the claw.
You know, and then I told him, I said, you got to drool a little.
Yeah.
You got to, drool a little.
Superflies. Look at those are all good. Abby, what would yours be? Because there are female wrestlers. This is a very popular
There
sport.
wasn't yesterday, and there wasn't.
There weren't any yesterday. I don't know.
I was waiting for it.
I would. That's for someone else to decide.
Abby the Masher Miller.
Masher Miller.
Oh.
I would mash.
Abby the concert goer. Doesn't have a ring to it.
Doesn't really strike fear in the
You
heart.
and Gwen should be a tag team, her roommate.
Ooh.
Did you see that?
Is there like some doubles?
The Jonas Sisters.
Third rope Abby.
The Jonas Sisters. I don't know. It's an inside joke.
It was fun.
So
Anyway,
Tom Brady's coming back.
what a shock.
No way.
Actually, that
Get
did
out.
shock me.
Really?
I was surprised, you guys. I was.
I really thought this would be the year for him to.
It did.
Close.
Were you kind of surprised over there? Did you feel like?
I felt the longer he waited to announce, the more likely he was coming back.
Have
Well-
you seen on the social media where some fella bought his supposedly last touchdown football?
$500,000. I said this morning on sports, he is racing to the bank to catch that. Turns out Tom needed the money, Joel.
Yeah, just terribly, terribly.
Poor fella.
You know, how many kids has he got? Maybe he's one ring short.
Yeah, maybe he needs another ring for
Wait,
the.
that's Philip Rivers that had 8 kids, right?
Philip has a deep family on that, but so Tom's coming back, and Kirk Cousins redid his deal. Kirk Cousins has as you know, Kirk Cousins a nice man. He's a lot of charity. He's that kind of guy. But he's made some. He has just done it exactly right. He was franchise tagged twice.
Yep.
Back-to-back years, which is cha-ching and cha-ching.
Business-wise.
Business-wise, and then comes to Minnesota, and then the $84 million with X number guarantee. I mean, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And now he's in a position where you either needed to try to move that off the books, trade him, all this kind of stuff. And instead, no. We're going to restructure his thing, guarantee more, so he actually gets a raise. But because they extend, you can
Salary
reduce
cap
dollars. That would be salary cap hit. So
I we never, the 3-4 of us in the mornings talk politics, and that's a good thing. But I have to say this. Kirk Cousins has trained me. I was ready for Kirk Cousins because I am a Democrat in North Dakota. Nobody likes him, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I've been defending Kirk Cousins, as you know, for a
all
while.
season long, yeah.
And I believe he had a very good year.
it puts up numbers.
Yes, and nobody takes just a step back. And I believe that he was, how many times did I say this? I thought he was coached poorly. I think that you've got a guy in Zimmer that was all about 3 yards, crowded dress. You've got to roll this guy out every now and then, even though you don't think he can roll out. I think he can.
Yep.
You got to teach him to step up in the pocket and throw deep early. They wouldn't let him do that.
Right.
They called plays with these little dink passes here, little dink. I just think that, and not only that, but the Vikings' new head coach,
Kevin O'Connell. Yeah.
O'Connell. Wasn't he Cousins' quarterback coach in Washington?
Yeah, so he's got ties back to Washington.
So it isn't like he doesn't know what he bought, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And obviously the guys, they keep paying him. So some of us, that's what Maury was just telling me. He goes, you see a guy traded, playing for 5 different major league teams or 6, and it has a bad connotation, like, he wants him. He goes, no, it's the other way around. Guy keeps getting traded for.
Okay.
Obviously people like him, so they keep paying
I forgot to tell you this.
Yeah.
Hold on, I get to tell you this first because he's like one of your best friends. I'm in a pool in Florida. Sue and I are hanging out with some folks, and we're talking baseball, right? And this guy from New York, he's very New York accent. Where are you from? New York. I said, so, you Mets or Yankee? He said, you're not going to believe this. And he was not a young man. He goes, I'm a Dodger. I was a Dodger.
Brooklyn Dodgers,
Yep.
sure.
And I said,
Really?
well, okay, then I get to tell you this. I got a friend that got to hang out most summers with Maury Wills. What?
Oh, so
What? I mean, this
got, like,
guy.
instant pool cred.
This guy was like, you've met him. I said, I met him. I hung out in the booth with him a couple times. And this guy was like, Maury Wells.
So,
I went, yes, Maury Wells.
Maury Wills.
That's good. You got good pool cred there.
Yeah,
so
I
you
did.
got some, Maury's.
If they just would have let me have a beer in that old people's pool, I would have liked it.
I heard that all you had was like 5 o'clock bingo and your dauber wasn't working.
They broke out into patriotic songs. All of a sudden, in the middle of the day, God bless. I'm like, okay, do I?
Joel had a very nice getaway.
Yeah.
Shuffleboard?
No shuffleboard. No pickleball.
So if Kirk Cousins
Lots of
is
sand.
making $40 million, how many paychecks do you get a year? 26.
Divide-
If you get paid every 2 weeks, that'd be 26 paychecks.
That'd be 104.
So
right?
every 2 weeks.
No, that's by week. Every two a week.
So you get
Never
20.
mind.
Say every 2 weeks he gets 1.5 million deposited into the old.
Oh, boy.
Wow. Could you imagine him calling the front office? Hey, you're a day late.
Hey,
Yeah.
I checked my
When's my check?
my bank and that. And,
All right.
And the Twins, obviously, what you need to know: 5-player blockbuster deal. They acquire Gary Sanchez. And let's hope Gary can research to some of the numbers because as a Yankee fan, you know that Sanchez wasn't doing it. And infielder Gio Urshela from the Yankees for third baseman Josh Donaldson, catcher Ben Rohrvet, and shortstop who we only knew for about 30 hours was the Minnesota Twin, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. But then also over the weekend, they made a deal and got Sonny Gray. So the Twins got some pitching there.
Well, these young guys aren't afraid to deal. This management team.
Derek Falvey.
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Stick around. More coming. Riveting. Abby, the scalper Miller, will still be with us right after this.
Oh my gosh.
The rose petal.
We should have Glenn Campbell Monday. Now this is the way life should be, right here. Huh, Russ?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Do you have this in your earbuds down there in Nolans?
Nolans.
You get
Nah.
back from Nolans
Nah.
this week?
Speaking of
What was the
American
best-
history,
What was the best thing you ate there?
charbroiled oysters at Drago's.
Oh.
They say that's an aphrodisiac.
Did you go with your wife?
Right?
Sure did.
There, we've solved something, have we not?
I don't know about
You
the
started
charbroiled.
it this time.
No, I don't. I just have been told that that group of food
And
is an aphrodisiac.
by the way, happy birthday to my mom today.
That's called a
Happy
seg.
birthday, Rusty's mom.
Very Freudian of you.
Out of how many people in this room who got to have a beer with Rusty's mom? I did.
You did.
Yep, I did. At this great restaurant in Williston. She's a wonderful, wonderful person.
Was it Grandma Sharon's?
Well, thank you.
No, it was
No, they don't serve beer at Grandma
Oh,
Sharon's.
that's right. They serve hot beef, hot
They
hamburger.
sure do.
What,
Some of the best in the state.
What's
That's
the
right.
name of it? It's the steakhouse. It's so good.
I can't remember.
Oh, it's really good. It's,
Porters?
the handles to get into it are Colt 45s.
Of course.
With
they are.
live rounds, by the way.
That's like, that's our neck of the woods,
safety's
Rusty.
on. I mean, the safety's
yeah.
on. And it's pointed down, so you're going to shoot your foot.
What is it with Western North Dakota? Like that? Like even if you went to like that restaurant that rhymes with the Mappers Metal out there.
Oh, yeah, the
So you're
Mappers
sitting
Metal.
down and eat. You've just got
With
just
the barrel in front of it.
heads of animals everywhere. It's like, and you're in like the salad bars in a canoe. You know, it's like
Yep.
those are my kind of
We
places.
can have that in Eastern, the Antelope Creek in Morton. How many
That's
dead
got
critters
some-
did you
oh,
see?
no,
Oh, yeah,
Oh, that's
they had
right.
a bunch of dead critters.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, they called them coat hangers. But there's a lot of them there in Morton.
Yeah.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you had oysters.
Yeah.
Walk me through that.
Okay. So
Is this where you put the red sauce on, like the
Horseradish?
or the white? What do you put on oysters?
well, these
The raw
particular oysters, raw ones, just scoop them and eat them. That's
Right.
what I do. But for the charbroiled ones, they had like a buttery plus Parmesan cheese
Ooh.
plus kind of a garlic
Well,
kind of
now-
a
That just
covering
sounds
on it.
good.
Now you're playing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Now I might even come within a foot of it.
The raw oysters you kind of loosen up around, and then you put a little horseradish red, and then you
Yep.
and those are good.
Are good.
But I lost a
yes.
friend to that.
Yes.
No way.
Yeah, Rayanne Kelch died from eating raw
she
oysters.
did, and in
so-
fact, it's for some people it affects. It triggered something in Rayanne, right?
Yep. It did. A
that's
good friend. I didn't mean to turn everything all serious,
No.
but I will tell you this.
Wonderful woman.
I
And her-
loved him. Yeah.
Yes,
she
wonderful
was,
woman.
She was a great legislator. But, for me personally, not so much aphrodisiac. Still.
It's very, it's very phlegm-like.
It is very
It's
phlegm-like. Yes.
What are they like though when they're cooked? When they're not? I've seen raw
less
ones, but
phlegm-like.
That's what I
good.
would eat.
That's
Yes.
good.
Yes. But everything tastes like chicken. I don't know.
Jim Gaffigan says because he despises lobster and crab and all that, he just calls it bug meat. And he says, and he was doing a concert show in Boston, which everybody loves, crab and lobster. And he's going through that. He goes, hey, look, crab, I get it. I like butter too.
True.
Which is kind of what it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's true.
So grade the move by the Vikings, scale of 1 to 10.
I think when you free up cap space and you somehow find a way to get that done, I'm for that.
Rusty, grade the move by the Vikings, 1 to 10.
7.
All right.
Grade
I
the
think
move
that's
by the
legitimate.
Twins. I don't think the Twins
I
are
don't
done
know
yet.
enough about it.
I
They
don't,
never-
I
I don't
know
think the
either.
Twins are done yet. To tell you the truth.
I think the Vikes this was all in on Jefferson, is what this was.
Yeah,
You get
they're-
the salary cap, back the Brinks truck up to Jefferson, and make them smile.
Well, at least they freed up some money.
Yep.
Now they can spend.
All right, Abby, what'd you learn today? You got 5 seconds, go.
I don't have a wrestler name yet. Don Haney.
Abby, Aphrodisiac,
Abby, the Mangler Miller.
The Mangler.
Mangler.
Hope you got your clock set right after yesterday. I woke up. Heidi was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos yesterday. And so I'm texting everybody going, hey, I got a note. Heidi's supposed to be on national TV today. Just check it out. And got about 3 sisters and a brother that text me back. Yep, she's on right now, Joel. And I'm like, wow, I forgot. She's
on right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
I am not a big fan of this time change.
No.
I'm not. I just absolutely want to go on record. If we could keep everything like it is in the fall, I'd be, when the fall back time, I'm way better. I don't want it to be light out until 10:30.
Yeah. It's annoying at this time of year when it gets all of a sudden it's dark again so early in the day.
Right. I
don't know. I guess with the summer it doesn't super bother me, but you have to wait to have a campfire until
10:30,
because it doesn't get dark.
I mean, you can't shoot fireworks off until it's wrong.
Yeah.
Call somebody. You know who you should call?
Who?
Because he's got the intellect to make sure that he could make a reasonable argument rather than just bring up the word fireworks.
Who is that?
My friend, Matt Dunlop. Matt was former Secretary of State in the state of Maine. Now he's like the big shot auditor in the state of Maine. Matt is somebody that I got to know through the American Council on Young Political Leaders. And we traveled Russia together for 15 days. And I relied on Matt a lot. His knowledge of Russia, his, he was the perfect person to be alongside of when we were doing this. He understands it. He understands a lot about Russia that most people aren't going to pick up on. And so I called him and said, Matt, come on with us. I mean, let's just talk for a while. And he said, sure, I'll do that. So Matt Dunlop, good to have you on News and Views, sir.
Hey, Joel, it's great to be back on the show. It's a great show. And just to give my own show a plug, I'm going to be hosting Maine Outdoors next Sunday night, talking about youth programs for wildlife education on WVOM 103.9 here in Maine.
There we go. I got to check it out, Matt. I do. I got to check it out. I know that that's a passion of yours as well. So, Matt, when you see this whole thing playing out, what's your first impression when you see what Vladimir Putin is doing to the Ukrainian people?
Well, it's heartbreaking. After you and I went to Russia as part of that delegation, it was covered. My trip there was covered by the main media, and I had some folks reach out to me from the Sister City Committee of Greater Portland and Archangel, which is way up in northern Russia, about latitudinally equivalent to the top of Hudson's Bay. And I've been over there a bunch of times, and we've hosted some delegations. And, when we went that first time, I think we all kind of had some assumptions about what we were going to see, because we'd grown up in the Cold War. In fact, my parents moved to Maine from Chicago partly because they were terrified of the idea of a nuclear war. They wanted to get out of the city. And that was what we grew up with. And we had this impression that Russians were grim people who wanted to conquer the world. And what we saw was completely different. These warm people who welcomed us. They wanted to share their lives with us. And that's what I've seen every time I've gone over, and with every group that's come to Maine. It's just friendship. And so when this broke out and we saw the run up to it, and nobody could really believe that Putin was going to actually invade Ukraine. And then he did. And I reached out to some folks in the Sister City Committee and said, what's the temperature over there? And what we're hearing is that people are despondent. They're heartbroken by this. And it's really hard to get that because, state media in Russia is so tightly controlled. And Putin has kind of reverted back to the Soviet days where you're looking at 15 years in prison for protesting. And people are told, smile or get arrested. And that's just what the reason why we started these exchanges was to stop all that. It's about people to people and understanding each other. So I hope that we don't lose sight of what's happening in Russia as well as what's happening in Ukraine throughout this entire tragedy.
Well, and where Matt is just so spot on, right? Excuse me. The people of Russia, everybody wakes up and it's like, okay, this is the evil. This is the people of Russia don't get up in the morning and think about the United States of America. They don't.
No.
They go about living their lives just like we do, and trying to do the best for themselves and their family just like we do. The problem that I see, Matt, is that, you know, if we have a tyrant as a leader, there's a process to take that tyrant out. You know, where in Russia, that in the end is everything that you and I worked on was a means of getting the type of relationships to where someday you were going to see a McDonald's in Russia.
Yeah.
And now McDonald's is saying we don't want to do business in Russia. And so if he did anything else to his own country, he did that. He took away the commerce, the ability for people to collectively do commerce together. And I just can't understand his motivation, Matt.
Yeah, to what end? To what end, really? I mean, last time I was there, the ruble was worth about 35 cents to the dollar. Now it's worth less than 3/4 of a penny. I mean, he's destroyed the Russian economy. And this is one of the things I think that, you know, the United States and the European allies have done really, really well as they've banded together on these sanctions. I mean, sanctions, we roll our eyes at sanctions. Are they ever effective? Well, when everybody participates, it's pretty darn effective. And you're seeing that Putin and Russia is paying a really, really heavy price for this so-called special military operation that's taking place right now.
Matt, go back in time a little bit, because when people think of Russia, you know, they think as far back as maybe Lenin, certainly Stalin. They don't look at you know, we in the United States are sitting here in a country that was, you know, we think of 1776. Other countries just laugh at that. You know, we're new to them yet. You know, when you think of the Russian people and their leaders, what do you think of, Matt?
Well, you go back to, you know, really a couple thousand years, really. You know, when we were in Moscow, if you remember, you know, they have what they call the rings, the ring roads that go around Moscow. And that was the series of outer walls as Moscow grew. I mean, it was a walled city because it was under constant assault from the Mongols, from, you know, it's always been a society that's been informed by the tragedy of war and invasion. You know, it's got a long history under the czars. Of course, that was all, you know, undone through that series of catastrophes in World War I, and then, of course, the Russian Revolution. And when you know, I went up to the Solovetsky Islands, which is way up in the White Sea, and it's home to this, I think it was like a 15th century monastery that is behind this enormous fortress that was built by the Tsar to protect the monastery from invasion. You know, so that's part of what informs Russia's mindset. I mean, we don't think about that. The last time we fought a land war against a foreign power in the United States was the War of 1812. We don't have any collective memory of this. When we were in Leningrad or St. Petersburg, you remember, I mean, the museum of, you know, the blockade with the memorials to the 1 million+ people that starved to death in the 1940s under that siege. Yeah, so Russia has, you know, their collective memory is one of constantly being under assault, and I think that, you know, that's sort of what's informed a lot of the support for Putin. You know, because when we were there, if you remember, one of our translators said that they kind of missed the communists, because when their communists were there, at least the power didn't go off for 4 hours a day. You know, that transition from the Soviet Union to the Russian Federation was a pretty painful one. Yeah. Putin has largely dialed it all back to what it was before. And I think I mean, the Russians have allowed that to happen, you know, partly because they sort of welcomed it. Not everybody did. There's been sort of this patina of openness that has now been shut off. But when I was there, maybe 10, 15 years ago, Putin had already moved through the Duma the provision that changed the regional governors from being elected to his appointment. You know, he controls 75% of the Duma and the Russian Federation Council. So that's a pretty consolidated level of control, and I think that's part of the problem. Like you mentioned, there's no checks and balances there now.
Yeah, when you look at, you know, we were talking about Western culture and the role it can play in, you know, a more free Russia, for lack of a better way of putting it. You have to ask yourself what people expect versus what they're going to deliver. Like Matt said, they just wanted the power to be on. Well, once you have the power on, and once you have it on consistently, you take that for granted. And are Russians today taking for granted something that sanctions have taken away from them? And that's what I want to ask Matt about when we come back. Matt Dunlap, ladies and gentlemen, one of my friends and somebody that understands Russia as well as anybody I'm probably ever going to meet. So stick around. More coming your way right here on News and Views. I always call it the Google, ladies and gentlemen. If you do the Google on Matt Dunlop from Maine, what you're going to find is a public servant and someone who understands many things in life, not the least of which what Russia is like. He's been there a number of times. I think, Matt, the first time you went was with me when we spent 15 days. Okay, and then you took that to a whole nother place after that. But I wanted to ask you about the Russian people after they've been exposed, which they have, to things in their lifestyle that we take for granted. Do they now take them for granted, and have they lost them during sanctions to the point where they're like, wait a second, something isn't working in leadership here?
Well, it comes down to the core question. What does a Russian person want? What do they want for themselves? And you know what they want? They want the same things we want. They want a better life for themselves. They want a more secure future for their kids. They want access to education. They want access to all the amenities that make life worth living. And it goes beyond just stuff like that we take for granted, like, restaurants like McDonald's and things like that. It's access to the world. And that's been shut off from them. And, you're seeing thousands of people fleeing Russia right now. They're going to Turkey. They're going to the Baltic states, wherever they can get out. A lot of people have left. Now, that's out of a context of like a country of hundreds of millions of people. You have 20 or 30,000 already that have gone to Istanbul. But it speaks to something. You see Russia from the Cold War period where you could not get certain things. You couldn't get meat, for example. Meat was very, very difficult to get. You couldn't get a telephone. You couldn't, if you were to buy a car, you had to like save the money up and then go with this wad of money to whoever could sell you a car. And that's, there wasn't a banking system that we take for granted. And that's been now well established, but now that's on the brink of collapse. So, I think, we see the sanctions as hitting Putin, but it hits regular Russian people too. And that's something to bear in mind. If you remember when, a couple of years ago when the pandemic hit, here in Maine, price of gasoline dropped to $1.50 a gallon. And one of the things that we were very cognizant of was that cheap gas wasn't good for everybody. You look at the oil industry in the Midwest and the Dakotas. People were really, really hurting from that. And I think that's what, you see happening in Russia too, that, people are going to be profoundly affected by this for a long, long time. And it probably won't get fixed, honest to God, until Putin's out. He's got a pretty firm grip on that country right now. And I'm not sure how effective the sanctions are going to be towards deterring him to a different course.
We think of things in terms of administrations. We don't think of things in terms, and that goes back to my point earlier about, the history of Russia versus the history of the U.S. We're always the Obama administration or the Bush administration, but I want to go back to that. Condoleezza Rice, I saw a piece with her talking about, when they floated Crimea and when they floated Ukraine being potentially placed into NATO. And George W. Bush was talking about that. And, she said that wasn't our best moment. So how big of a role did that play in Putin and the rest of the leaders in Russia being nervous about losing any semblance of control on their borders?
I think it's part of a series of events that did play a strong role in all that. Look at what happened in 2014 when, and of course, that was a different scenario. And I think this is part of the miscalculation that Putin has made, where you look at 2014 when they took Crimea, the president of Ukraine was basically trying to drive Ukraine back towards Russia, and he was ousted for it. And that same week was when they launched that incursion into Crimea, and the admiral of the Ukrainian Navy in the area, actually the second day of the incursion, defected to the other side. Half the Ukrainian military in Crimea defected to the other side. And I think, even Putin said that he couldn't believe how easy it was. But that was a different framework. The Ukrainian government was kind of split. It was in disarray. And I think what he expected was he could sort of waltz into Ukraine and have this all done in a couple of days. And that's not been the case because, Zelensky has transformed that government and transformed the military and has pushed it more towards the West, which is really what Putin can't tolerate. And that worldview that Putin has is of the Russian Empire, which, the czars and the Bolsheviks had to have an iron grip to hold together. And when that iron grip began to relax in the early 90s, with glasnost and perestroika, it just completely blew apart. And there's no way you can hold something like that together unless you have an iron grip. And I think that's what we see in these types of autocracies. And we have a lot of debates in this country, and sometimes I think we find ourselves incredibly divided. But I think everybody believes in America. Likewise in Russia. I was in Archangel for City Day a few years ago, a great summertime festival, and they had this guy. He's sort of the Russian version of Tom Jones. He had this really big, awful hairpiece, and he gets on the stage because the city square is filled with probably 30,000 people, and he starts singing these old patriotic songs from World War II. Joel, everybody in the audience knew every word to every song, because they'd lived through that terrible, terrible time of the Great Patriotic War. That's what they call it. When 26 million Russians were killed in World War II. We can't even begin to identify with something like that. And one of the things I've observed about Russians, you go to North Dakota, or you go to New Mexico, or Maine, or Florida, you're going to meet people who sort of embody that region, right? You're going to meet the lobsterman on the coast of Maine, the rancher in North Dakota, or wherever. You go to Russia, you meet somebody who's Russian, they are Russia. They have that whole, whole social, psychological history in their hearts.
Matt,
it's a different culture.
Matt, do you have a little more time? I hope you say yes. I understand if you say no.
Yeah, I got all the time you need.
All right.
All the time you need.
Thank you, Matt. When we come back, a couple more questions, not the least of which is, did the Obama administration botch Crimea? I've got to ask him that right after this. Awarded a scholarship to travel Russia and speak to Russian officials and elected leaders. Man, I was 39 years old and I'm 60 now. So go ahead and do the math on that. But Matt was one of those individuals I just had a tremendous amount of respect for. A public servant from the state of Maine going into also serving Maine in the executive side. At that time, he was on the legislative side. He's willing to share some more time with us as what I consider to be one of my best friends that is an expert when it comes to Russia, Russia policy, the Russian people. Matt, I wanted to talk about the Obama administration and Crimea. There's a lot of people talking about how with what's going on in Ukraine, that tone was set, that they could do this based upon how the Obama administration handled Crimea. And I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, I think there is a shadow there. But remember, the situation in Ukraine was much different. The governmental structure was different. The sentiment was different. And really, Obama faced the same thing that Biden faces and that Bush faced when Russia went into Georgia and what Clinton faced when Russia went into Chechnya. And that is, Russia has about 4,000 nuclear warheads. And Putin has made no secret of his willingness to use them if anybody gets in his way. And that's what hangs over this whole thing. And that's why we don't have tanks and helicopters and, F-22s over Ukraine right now, because you could spark a wider war. You have to give all these administrations a little bit of a pass for trying to keep us out of a nuclear global, conflagration. And what is our interest there? I mean, on the other hand, I think, you look at the analysis of what to be expected from Ukraine if Russia went in February. And I think everybody sort of assumed it was going to be a quick fight. Nobody had an awful lot of high expectations for the military. Vladimir Zelensky is a retired comedian. Nobody took him terribly seriously. He's kind of turned into Winston Churchill, right? Mm-hmm. You had, this situation on Snake Island when the soldiers there were told to surrender. They suggested to the Russian ship that they do something anatomically impossible to themselves.
I like them.
Yeah, the grandmother who gave the sunflower seeds to the Russian soldiers and said, "Put these in your pockets so something will grow from your graves when we bury you."
Yep.
We haven't seen anything like this in our lifetime, Joel, and that's kind of never mind the geopolitics of the Obama administration choosing not to get involved in a war where Ukraine wasn't terribly invested in it, or the threat of nuclear war if we went and tried to confront them in Georgia or Chechnya or even here now and today. This is Henry V at Agincourt. This is the 101st Airborne in Bastogne. This is the Marines at Quezon. I mean, you're seeing tremendous courage against insurmountable odds, and it's really caught people's imagination, and that's why you're seeing these Ukrainian flags everywhere. You have people who are fighting for democracy and self-determination in a way that we have not seen in our lifetimes. It's black and white in a way that we have not seen probably since 9/11. And it's really, really inspiring. And I think that's what's putting some more pressure on NATO and the Western powers as to when do you get into this thing? At what point do you throw all in and not let Ukraine be pounded into rubble?
So that then brings up another question, though, because, we've brought up George W. Bush, we've brought up the Obama administration. I want to talk just 1 second about the Trump administration, because a lot of people in America believe that we wouldn't have seen this situation in Ukraine had Donald Trump still been president, that the relationship he had with Vladimir Putin would never have led to this because Trump would have been a strong enough leader that he wouldn't have challenged Trump on this. Putin wouldn't have. What your thoughts on that, Matt?
I think the inverse. I think, Putin made this decision after 2014. And I think that if, given, what we've learned about Trump's relationship with Putin, and he's spoken admiringly of Putin, that probably you would see Putin having a freer hand in Ukraine today than he does. Because that's all speculative, right? Because we don't know what Trump would have done. any more than you'd know what Richard Nixon would have done if he was president during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's completely speculative. But I do think that, the landscape's the same regardless. You have, the nuclear arsenal of the Russian Federation sort of standing in the background. The real shocker is how poorly the Russian military has done in Ukraine. With almost 200,000 troops, they've lost, we lost 4 tanks in Desert Storm. They've lost something like 300 tanks. That's unbelievable.
In 4 weeks.
In 4 weeks. And they've lost more soldiers in 4 weeks than Americans fell in Afghanistan in 20 years. And that tells you something about the professionalism of the American military versus the Russian military. You take the nuclear weapons out of it, it's not even a contest.
Do you believe Vladimir Putin would use nuclear weapons?
I think you have to believe that, because we keep underestimating him. Nobody thought he'd go into Ukraine. Well, he went into Ukraine. Well, now nobody thought he'd actually stay. Well, he's not changing course at all. In fact, if anything, he's kind of doubling down. So I think that's the real game changer. Should we see the use of an intermediate range missile in Ukraine? I think now you're seeing a much, much different conflict after that.
Matt Dunlop, ladies and gentlemen, is our guest. Matt is my go-to guy when it comes to all things Russia. We traveled it together for 15 days, and clearly he was someone I could always count on for understanding the history of it. But what we both found out, and I think I can speak on our behalf, what we both found out, Matt, was that Russian people weren't that much different than people from America. They
not at all.
And I think we need to keep that in mind throughout this process. They're not. The difference is they don't have no say whatsoever in this decision of what's happening. I have to ask you this: how does this end for Vladimir Putin? How does this war resolve itself, Matt?
Well, I think I agree with some of the analysis from the real national experts. I mean, you refer to me as an expert. It's kind of like I'm the guy that stepped on a nail and know what it feels like talking to somebody who's never stepped on a nail. But I think in terms of how this ends, it's going to end badly for Putin. It's going to end badly sooner or later. It's going to, he's going to lose more or less, but he's going to lose, and it's going to taint him. And depending on how much either the people around him, whether that's the oligarchs or the people in the Kremlin or the Russian people themselves, how they decide to draw that bright line and win is really the wild card here. We don't know. You have to assume that there are some conversations happening around some water cooler in the Kremlin saying, how far do we let this go? But he's well insulated from all that. He's surrounded himself with people who benefit from him, and they're going to protect him to the bitter end. And I just don't know how that's going to turn out. But, there's a lot of different scenarios, including maybe a negotiated peace. Maybe he decides to occupy Ukraine indefinitely at great expense with continued sanctions. Or the worst case scenario is that the conflict expands and that the rest of Europe, perhaps even with nuclear weapons or some other horrifying idea, which we really, I think, are smart to try to avoid.
Matt, the historical relationship between Russia and China. I'm curious your take on that, and if you could expand that into where you see their relationship now. Because to me, obviously you've got the nuclear question, but Russia is absolutely no threat to the West militarily without nuclear weapons or without China, Matt.
Well, Russia and China have had not the cheek-by-jowl relationship that people would assume simply because you go back to the Soviet days, they were both communist countries. They were very standoffish from each other and didn't trust each other. And of course, China stands to benefit greatly from a conflict between Russia and the West because, like the old saying, if your enemy's making a mistake, don't interrupt them. So their involvement is kind of a question mark right now. Putin allegedly has turned to them and asked for military support and relief from sanctions. If you're Chairman Xi, do you go along with that? Because do you want to get pulled into this? Do you want to have sanctions imposed on China? And as we have seen, they've been pretty crushing in Russia. I think China will hesitate to get too involved in this. They've got because I think what they were watching was to see how easily this went for Putin and Russia and what the Western response was going to be. And that would inform maybe what they decided to do with Taiwan, which is another potential flashpoint. And I think, they may have gone back to their crossword puzzles after watching what's happened in Ukraine. Just that sheer force of that response has been huge.
Well, and that's, kind of where I'm at when it comes to NATO. It wasn't that long ago in the previous administration that our relationship in NATO with the other countries wasn't strong. I think we both can admit that. And so to be able to pull these countries together when they have fiscal interest in making sure that Russia, quite frankly, is a strong country economically. Yeah. I mean, people lose sight of all of that how much European nations are paying the price for these sanctions as well.
Yeah, and I think that's one area where Trump was spot on. He said that the countries of NATO needed to do more to pull their weight. And now, of course, that's been manifestly made clear that that's true. And you're seeing Germany getting more involved, building up its military, because they're saying, we can't depend on somebody else to save us. We're going to have to be ready to save ourselves if Russia does look west, either now or sometime in the future. So, I think you're absolutely right about that.
Matt, write more about this. I think people need to hear what you just said, and I really appreciate you giving us time here. I'm going to do this one more time and no matter who gets mad on my station for promoting some other station, but tell people when they can find your work coming up.
So I fill in periodically on WVOM here in Maine. It's a statewide broadcast on Maine Outdoors. It's heard every night, 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And we talk about everything to do with hunting, fishing, snowmobiling, you name it, on the outdoors. And if we're wrapping up here, Joel, I'm going to one quote I remember from you after we had been in Russia for a few days and people had treated us like lost brothers and sisters. You said to me, how do you feel now after all those billions of dollars that we've spent over the years pointing missiles at these people who care about us so much? And that's what we have to get back to, is get back to that person-to-person contact and remember that we're all people. We're here for the same reason.
And that is what I left Russia with, which is how did we get to that point? How did we? And so thank you, Matt. Appreciate it. And I do not promise to not call you back when it comes to this another day here. So appreciate it, buddy.
All right. Happy to come on, and stay well, Joel.
You bet. Matt Dunlop, ladies and gentlemen. I want to get your thoughts, 1-800-880-5346 on our Laney's News and Views studio line right after this. 1-800-880-5346. As Sarah Heinrich is going to be heading to Bismarck, as am I, on Wednesday. The Northwest Landowners Association is going to be holding their meeting, which is a way that, Sarah, you get to talk about ranching and farming. And you always seem happier when you're doing that, Sarah.
Absolutely. So those are my favorite times, is when I'm able to be out talking to producers. It beats being in an office any day of the week.
Exactly. So, we've been talking a lot this morning about Russia, and obviously that's affected our commodity prices as well. What are they looking like on this Monday?
We've got a mixed board right now, with corn in the red, seeing May corn down 11 1/4 at 7.51, December at 6.52, down 3 1/4, May wheat up 25 3/4 at 10.96, September at 10.58, up 23.5 cents. May soybeans up 7 1/4 at 16.83, new crop November at 14.86, 4 cents lower. In the cattle market, seeing some upward movement. April feeder cattle up 3.98, while April live cattle are 2.33 higher at 139.63. And for April lean hogs, $1.15 lower at 101.60. With your markets, I'm Farm and Ranch Director Sarah Heinrich for the News and Views Radio Network from the Enterprise Sales Ag Studio. Enterprise Sales of LA City, your grain handling and storage experts.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll talk a little bit later. Folks, when you get a chance to visit with a man like Matt Dunlop, what you find is someone who goes back in time to look at the history of how we got to where we're at today. And I think that that's something that Americans have never been good at. I don't think we have. I think that we go through an administration, then we forget that administration after 2 administrations. And yes, we're good at looking forward. We're good at looking at what we feel needs to happen. My first impulse, and this is a perfect example of reactionary thought, and it didn't take me long to reason this out in my head and realize this was a poor choice. But my first impulse was, you bet, no fly zone, let's do it. Let's show them the might of the U.S. military. And then about, a minute later, I'm like, well, wait a second, that means we're at war. I mean, that is World War III. If we do that I have said all along when it comes to Ukraine that what matters the most is, where we're at with China, where we're at. Are we back channeling with China? Are we talking to them? Are we sure they're going to stay out of the war? We all know what happened in Korea. Is there something going on here that we can be assured that these sanctions and everything that goes with them are only applicable to Russia, right? Because we can collectively, as NATO, take on Russia and make sure that Vladimir Putin feels the pain. He's already, and I believe that the reports are true, he's already reached out to China, because there's a world embarrassment as well, ladies and gentlemen, when you're marching, the tanks and the troops and everything, and you've got this big display of military might, and then you take it out in the field and you put it to work on a land war, and what you find out is it's not good. I mean, it's not. It's not managed properly. It doesn't run properly. Heaven forbid you'd actually fuel what you need to fuel. You've got troops themselves that, because you didn't tell them why they were even going to be there, aren't geared up for what they might need to do with urban warfare. This thing from a Russian standpoint was completely reactionary, and it was based upon the fact that they thought NATO would stay out of it. They thought that NATO was weak. Well, NATO wasn't weak. We're not weak. And I give the Biden administration a ton of credit for that. And I give the American people a ton of credit for that as well. I have had so many people from both sides of the aisle talk about how, look, I will pay more for gas if it means that these Ukrainian people get their country. When we come back, Supreme Court Justice, right after this. Ketanji Brown Jackson, she's a judge now, and she has been appointed by the President of the United States to the United States Supreme Court. Tierney Sneed is a digital writer covering the Department of Justice for CNN, which means that every morning she gets up and says, all right, I'm going to cover exactly what happens in the Justice Department, which means she's going to cover this on behalf of CNN. Tierney, good to have you on News and Views. Thank you for coming on. Ms. Sneed, do I have you?
Oh, hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I've got you now.
Hi. Sorry about that. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
That's okay. Good to have you on. Want to talk a little bit about how all of this is playing out from a Midwest standpoint. Just on a common sense level, it's hard to see people lining up against Judge Brown Jackson when they voted for her appointment before. I mean, how does this shake out as you cover it?
So what I've been hearing so far, being on the Hill and talking to senators, is the expectation here is this is not going to be a scorched earth, fiery hearing. And as you mentioned, she's received Republican votes in the past when she was up for an appellate judgeship last year. Republicans are saying that just because they voted for her last year, that doesn't mean they're going to vote for her this year, and vice versa. There's some Republicans who didn't vote for her last year who are signaling that they might be open to her this year. But overall, we're seeing, after a couple of years of really, really tense, aggressive Supreme Court fights, the stakes are a little bit lower for this one because she is replacing another liberal justice. She's not going to be changing the tilt of the court.
Well, and that has to play a big factor in this. I mean, for probably the rest of my life, the court's going to be stacked with Republicans, with conservative Republicans. And so the concern must really go away. And so I have to ask you this, which is, to take on, a woman and to take on a black woman, that can't play well for some of these Republicans back home.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. But this is not a Supreme Court nominee who's going to drastically change the court, which is what is keeping temperatures calm about this nomination. And like you said, the downside of launching an aggressive fight against her as the first black female nominee to the court, I mean, that could be a real backlash that would benefit Democrats in the midterm. So there is this sense of first do no harm. And if we're Republicans, sure, we're going to challenge her. Sure, we're going to vet her. But let's not get so riled up that we end up exciting President Joe Biden's and the Democrats' base and motivating them in the midterms, particularly for a nominee, like I said, who's not going to change the lean of the court. This is a conservative court. It's a 6-3 court, and it's going to be a conservative court for years and possibly decades.
How much conversation are there in the halls of Congress in regards to the parameters that President Biden put on this appointment, that he said it was going to be a black woman. And so that eliminated any consideration of a lot of other people in this. How much back channel discussion is there on that?
So, when Justice Breyer first announced his retirement and President Biden reaffirmed his commitment to nominate a black female to the court, an historic nomination, we did see a few Republicans criticize that pledge and sort of suggest that because he was sticking to that framework, he was limiting his options and perhaps discriminating against other judges. But those lines of attack did not play well. It really kind of backfired and it attracted a lot of negative scrutiny. And this goes back to my larger point: is when you're challenging this nominee and you're a Republican, you want to make sure you're challenging her in a way that's not going to cause you more political harm than good. So since those first couple comments after Justice Breyer's retirement news, I haven't heard much of criticism of the pledge since. And I think for Republicans, it becomes a little easier when there's actually a nominee name that you could talk about her specific record and her specific judicial philosophy. But yeah, I think that's a line of attack that they, after a few trial balloons, they're going to be avoiding in the future.
What about Judge Brown Jackson herself? We can talk about being vetted for a district judge, a federal judge position versus a Supreme Court judge position. Are those two different vettings? Is one certainly more intense? And what history does Judge Brown Jackson have?
Yeah, so this is one thing that I'm hearing on the Hill. The difference between the two nominations is that when you're an appellate judge or a district court judge, you're supposed to be respecting Supreme Court precedent. You're supposed to be just doing what the Supreme Court told you to do in dealing with certain cases. And once you're on the Supreme Court, obviously you get to create the precedent or potentially overturn precedent, which is why we're going to see her get a deeper vetting than what she got a year ago or 8 or 9 years ago when she was up for these previous roles. And what I'm hearing is there's a lot of talk about asking her about her judicial philosophy, what she sees the role of a judge, but also I think there's going to be a lot of look at her record as a public defender on the Sentencing Commission. She served several years on the Sentencing Commission. And what that means, particularly in this context where crime is an issue that we're hearing a lot about, and what does it mean in that context? But you're right. Even though she did go through this vetting process just a year ago, it does raise different questions when you're up for a Supreme Court judgeship.
So what's the timing of all this? I mean, when do we start seeing this play out on your network, on CNN and others?
Yeah, so this week is her last week on the Hill, meeting senators one-on-one. These are private meetings. You know, they'll make some remarks publicly at the beginning, at the end, but then she meets senators one-on-one in private meetings. And I think these meetings will be, even though we don't get to see them, they could be very crucial to her getting Republican support. I've heard some Republicans say that talking to her one-on-one, something they may not have been able to do for her appellate nomination, will be really important to them to understanding whether they can support her for the Supreme Court justice position. Then next week, we will pivot towards the public hearings. And this is where we could see some fireworks, though. Like I said, I think temperatures are going to be a little cooler than they've been in previous Supreme Court hearings. And those will start on Monday. There'll be some opening statements. She'll be introduced by her supporters. She'll get to make some opening statements. The committee members will make some opening statements. This is in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday is when they'll get to grill her and ask her questions and challenge her views. So that's going to be the meat of it, is Tuesday, Wednesday. And then they'll continue Thursday with some other witnesses who will appear to testify and talk about her as well. So next week is really when we're going to see everything come to a head, and that's going to be the must-watch moment for this confirmation process.
So what's the perception of Judge Brown Jackson in relation to what she still will have a vote? She still will be on the Supreme Court, albeit in the minority. Is she seen more liberal? Is she seen, as someone middle of the road? What's the perception of the judge?
What excites her supporters is her background as a public defender. She worked for several years in the D.C. Federal Public Defender's Office, and that's a first for the court. So that experience that she has representing poor defendants, people who've perhaps been marginalized by the criminal justice system, her supporters get really excited about that. So even though she's not going to change the lean in this sort of 6-3 paradigm, her bringing that experience might move the court in different ways than if you were going to get a typical Supreme Court justice who doesn't have that experience. And it's been years since we've had a justice with criminal defense experience get elevated to the Supreme Court. So that's one thing her supporters are really excited about. Of course, on the other side, on the conservative side, there's a little bit of disappointment because among the Black women that President Biden was thinking about for this position, there were other judges who were a little bit more to the center. Judge Michelle Childs had the very vocal support of Senator Lindsey Graham, who said he thought she would get several Republican votes. So we'll see some Republicans say that Biden could have picked a more centrist judge, and he went with someone who was more liberal. But I think what this really will come down to, like I said, because she is replacing a liberal justice, is what are the individual specific things about her background that's a little bit different than Justice Breyer and some of the other Democratic appointees on the court.
Is that the same Lindsey Graham that wouldn't take a meeting with Merrick Garland? I just need to know that.
Yes, he's been all over the place. I mean, he supported Judge Jackson when she was at the D.C. circuit, but he's saying now that, you should not assume that he would support her now. And like I said, I think he's really pushing Judge Childs and was very upset that the President Biden did not choose Judge Childs for this role. But, it was ultimately President Biden's decision, and it seemed like Judge Jackson really had the broad support across the Democratic Party and across these various constituencies. Labor is a big fan of her because she's issued rulings in favor of unions in the past. So it will be interesting to see what about her specific record becomes the focus, and what different qualities and background and experience she'll bring to the court.
So last one, I promise, covering the court in the Justice Department as closely as what you have. You know, there's always talk about the collegial nature of these justices behind the scenes, no matter what their philosophies may be. With this new court, is that still true? With the makeup of this court now being so heavily to the right, do they still get along, Tierney?
You know, I think they do. And they really, in every public interview, they talk about this. And obviously their opinions and their dissents can get extremely feisty. And for us lay people, it's hard to believe that you could write such pointed decisions and call out your colleagues so sharply and still, at the end of the day, be able to have warm relationships with them. But that's something that these justices really do stress. And one interesting thing, you know, you talk about this particular court, but I also just want to highlight COVID-19 and the effect that had and when they were all working remotely and unable to meet in person. And now that they're back in person, they do say that they feel good about being back in person and being in that physical space with one another. So it sounds crazy to you and me because, like I said, these opinions they write can be really pointed, but they insist that they are, you know, they can put that aside and still have warm relationships with one another.
You know, Tierney Sneed is a digital writer covering the Department of Justice for CNN. She gave us some time today, and I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks. It was so much fun to chat with you. It was great to be here.
You bet. All right, let's head to the Weather Cave and visit with Don Haney. Find out what the weather holds.
Thank you very much, Joel. Today across North Dakota, seeing decreasing clouds over
Play The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance for me. You couldn't?
We listened to it on the break. I felt like that was enough.
She didn't know the song The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. I'm trying to you need to absorb all the things that I learned from my father.
Should have I known it?
That wasn't exactly my era, my song, but I knew it. Because my dad
I know
would listen
stuff outside of my era.
Now, let me ask you this. Was I a good grandfather or a bad grandfather for taking my 3 eldest grandkids to the wrestling match in Wapton yesterday called Below Zero Wrestling?
I've been thinking about that. I think you're fine. I don't think it's a great idea, but I mean, you got good bonding time with them.
I did.
And
I got to see them.
They may not have behaved the best or come out with the best life lessons, but
the key to that is to drop them off really quick at the door and then drive away really fast.
And don't go inside.
And so when they're doing pile drivers on each other and all of that, you're not there when it's happening.
Yeah, and you'd say, I don't know where they learned that.
Right. All right, there's 3 branches of government. If you are a member of Congress, every 2 years, you've got to put your name on the ballot to run. If you're a member of the United States Senate, you've got to put your name on the ballot if you want the job again every 6 years, right? If you're a Supreme Court justice, you get appointed simply by appointment from Congress, appointment for the president, and approval from the United States Senate, and then you're there for life. Do I need to say it any differently? For life. And I said this same thing when the Democrats had control of the Supreme Court, when the court was liberal. It was like, look, that isn't representative of where America is. It moves, it ebbs, it flows. And I know attorneys don't like my opinion, but I don't care. They shouldn't be on there for life. Ruth Bader Ginsburg then should have retired. I blame her for some of this as well. I know that doesn't make me popular. Every now and then you're sitting around with the boys and you say, all right, what do you think if? What if we did this? What if we did that? Well, Luke Schaefer is one of those, and he got around and he said, what if we had an absolutely fabulous outdoor music event? I don't want to say concert, event that now spans 4 days, and we call it ND Country Fest in New Salem, North Dakota. You imagine the guys that were sitting there with him. They said, yeah, right, Luke, have another beer. It won't work. It won't work. You're not going to get the boys out there. You're not going to get big enough bands out there. You're not going to make this happen. Just relax. Well, ask yourself this. Did it work? Let's get Luke Schaefer on and visit with him a bit. Luke, good to have you back on News and Views.
Joel, how are you?
Not bad.
Now they're saying, how did you do that?
I know. Here's the deal, Luke. I was one of those. I was excited by it. I love the concept of it. I knew that there was the need for it, all of that, but I didn't think you'd be able to grow it into this fast. I mean, whatever the game plan was or the people you surrounded yourself with, I mean, it's working, Luke.
And you're exactly right. It's not just about me and Brandon Ralph, the other owner. It's about who we surrounded ourselves with, and quickly. And the support of the state is no joke. It was the need was there. We put it out there, and then how the state of North Dakota absorbed it, welcomed it, and said, we've been waiting for something this for so long, just like this, for our state, and we're running with it. And that's what has really grown this thing from where it was to where it is today. And I can't thank the great people of North Dakota for that support. And it spread so fast around the whole, not only the region, but the nation. Man, it's a national brand now. Like in the world of country music, people know ND Country Fest, and something we're very proud of, but it also is something the state of North Dakota should be extremely proud of too.
Well, and it plays into that. When you're getting top-notch bands, you're getting artists that come to New Salem that feel they need to go to New Salem to help, number one, their brand, number two, their sales. It's the other things other than whatever you might pay them to perform. It's about making sure they're relevant by being out in front of country music fans, and you've turned it into that, Luke. I mean, you really have.
You are exactly right. You're exactly right. They get the promotion that they get out of it, the exposure they get out of it now. They know it's a great stage to be on, for sure, in the Midwest and in the country music festival scene. But on what they always say is when they're done, is they're like, man, the North Dakota crowd, there's nothing like it, because they are so into it. They're singing back to me, dang near every single song that I sing. And one great example of that was back when we had Charlie Daniels on, and his band mates, when that was done, they're like, we have not seen him perform like that in years. And it was the crowd. He goes, they were just feeding right. He was just feeding right off of that North Dakota crowd. And that's something great to hear, because it's just that vibe that's in the whole bowl that the artists get from the whole crowd. And it makes them feel at home, and they're just giving it right back to them with singing their songs, and they absolutely love it.
I had a chance to meet Charlie Daniels at Dakota Magic Casino one time, and just found him to be the most sincere and decent person you could meet. But when he came running out in front of that big crowd at ND Country Fest, turning his bow, you can't fake that. I mean, he was pumped, and he was not a young man. Unfortunately, he's lost to us now, but he was not a young man when he did that. But he came shooting out like he's about to play in the Super Bowl.
Right. And even just last year's artist, from Brantley Gilbert. Brantley Gilbert was like, hey, if I'd known you guys were all this cool, I would have showed up a couple more hours earlier and hung out with you, everybody, But even so, like from him to Dustin Lynch to John Michael Montgomery, Leroy Parnell last year, all of them were like, it's just an amazing, amazing feeling to be here with this crowd and these people in North Dakota. They're like, well, anytime you want us to come back, you just let us know.
Well,
it's really special.
Are you ever fearful, Luke, that it's growing too big too fast?
Well, I'm gonna say no on that because we've always been looking towards the future. I mean, we have our plan out from 5 years to 10 years, and we're always talking about, okay, what if this happens? What are we going to do if this happens? What happens when we get to this amount of people per day? What are we going to do when, we get these type of artists and we go another day? Even the fourth day has been planned, adding another day, because we're going to 4 days this year. That has been planned 3 years ago. Now we're just about to put it in, now we're putting it into play. So we're always looking forward and looking ahead. So as it grows, we have our things and our strategies that we're talking about constantly, because we know it'll get there, and then when we're ready to put it into play, we've already talked about it for a year or two, and now it's just to execute it.
Yeah.
So we feel that we talk about these things on almost a daily basis.
Well, you always have something new cooking. I mean, what do you want to make sure you tell that crowd today?
Hey, I'm just going to tell them we're gonna save that just a little bit. We're always about the experience for our guests at Indie Country Fest. We have more new experiences coming for everybody.
Come on,
everybody from
leak
VIP.
Just a little bit. Come on,
everybody from VIP. I'm going to say you got to get your tickets because, man, it is going fast. And we have those experiences. And you're going to have to come back and listen to you as we get closer, because that's when we'll reveal some of those new experiences for everybody. But there's the same ones all the way from the Main Street opening up. We have a huge, cool activations that are happening in the Frontier Campground, which is the GA campground, and more in the VIP, which we'll announce as we get closer and closer. But we are excited and ecstatic about the 2022 lineup. It's the biggest lineup we've ever had, full of country stars, full of them. It's like a lifetime of hits from 90s all the way to present. And you rip right through that thing, and it's like, man, it's 4 days of, hey, I can't wait for tomorrow. Can't wait for Thursday. Can't wait to see Friday's show. Can't wait to see Saturday's show. And I just reviewed the whole lineup just through this weekend, just going through some things, and I'm like, man, that thing is just loaded with country music stars, and it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
I would also add this, that if you think these guys aren't committed to where we live, what we do, and who we are, I want you to make sure, Luke, you tell people what it costs the first night and who is going to benefit from the money that night.
Hey, Thanks for letting me mention this. Our first night, Wednesday night, is our give back night, so there's no admission needed to get in. But there is a suggested donation at the door, of $20 or more, but 100% of those funds. So this is our give back nights. We love to get back to the community. We love to get back to businesses and associations of North Dakota. 100% of that night on Wednesday night, of that money collected goes right back to the 4-H club and the FFA clubs of North Dakota. So we want to support all those kids. And that night headlining is low cash. Low cash. There's no admission. Donate at the door. Support all those kids, the 4-H and FFA. And there we go. Wednesday night is going to be it'll be our biggest Wednesday, our give back night ever. And we're trying to push like crazy so we can get those donations just out of the roof for those kids in those organizations.
Well, it isn't just Western North Dakota. I give you my word on that, Luke. I have a lot of friends here in Eastern North Dakota and Western Minnesota, Northern South Dakota, that are going to make this a destination. You've picked up on what has been a void in their life as country music fans. So thank you for that. If they want to find out more, they want more information, where do they go, Luke?
They can go to ndcountryfest.com and go ahead and get their tickets here and camping for this July. And they can look at the lineup right there and go through the whole thing and see who's playing what days. And you do not want to miss this one. But we do have our tour coming up where we go around the whole state of North Dakota. We have a show in South Dakota and a show in Minnesota, which we start next week. Next week, Thursday, we kick it off in Bismarck with David Lee Murphy. And that's when we're traveling around the whole state and putting on 9 concerts with him throughout the state of North Dakota and then South Dakota and Minnesota. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you along the way and seeing you when we're in our Fargo stop at the TAC it's not the Fargo stop, but it's in Dilworth at the TAC on April 2nd. That's where we'll end the tour right then and there with David Lee Murphy. We have 5 artists coming to that show. And man, even all those shows with David Lee Murphy, go to ndcountryfest.com/Your Tour. A lot of those are getting really, really tight on tickets because some are pretty small venues and some of them are pretty big, but they are going fast. And we can't wait to come out and see everybody in North Dakota. Follow us on our Facebook page because we'll be going live and shooting photos in every small town that we're in through the state of North Dakota. And track us down. We'll say hi. We got some swag. We're giving away a bunch of tickets. We got a red carpet going on every single night at the concert. And it'll be fun. And I'm sure we'll see you, Joe. We'll see you in Dilworth, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, it's a perfect venue. It's going to be fun. Luke, always good to talk to you, man. Thanks for what you're doing.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me, and thank you for supporting us. We appreciate you.
Luke Schaefer, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get to Don Haney, and he'll know what's going on in the weather. Don, I woke up to a couple inches of snow in my driveway.
There were some areas in central Minnesota and towards Twin Cities, Joel, that had over 3 inches of snow, but there's going to be a big melt coming.
This good weather is going to put the cruiser back on the road where it's supposed to be. It's sponsored by the North Dakota Farmers Union, the North Dakota Association of Rural Electric Cooperatives, Pifers, Auction, Realty, and Land Management, and Nielsen Brand Law, Broadband Association of North Dakota. Matt Dunlop, and many of you might not have heard that. I encourage you to go wherever you hear podcasts, and I would include the home base of the News and Views Radio Network, which is the mighty 790 KFGO. Matt Dunlop speaking to the issue of where the Russian people are, how the Russian people are. The one thing that both Matt and I learned in traveling Russia for the 15 days together was that they're not different than us. They're not. Their leadership is different. What they allow their government to do, out of fear. I mean, look at the people that are out protesting in the street right now. Some of them are going to get 15 years in jail, right? So be happy. Be ecstatic with the government that we have. You might not like the fact that Joe Biden was elected. I might not like the fact that Donald Trump was elected. The truth of the matter is they were elected. You can put out all the signs you want of how the election was rigged. That's a lie. You can put out all the signs you want that Hillary Clinton really won. That's a lie. You can put out all the let's go Brandon signs you want. That's little to no class. Actually, it isn't little to no class. It's disgusting. It is no class. And so when you do those types of things, I would argue that really you're not accepting the process that we have over Russia. I mean, we have freedom of speech. I get it. I understand it. You can prove yourself to be an idiot by the way you talk, but that doesn't make it right. Now, Tulsi Gabbard she is a former congresswoman from the state of Hawaii. She ran for president under the Democratic banner. She left the Democratic Party and has since become, I think you could say, an ultra-conservative. She's seeking attention. That's what she wants. Go on social media and check out what she said. She's talking about how in Ukraine they are developing and have developed chemical weaponry. That's what Russia wants to say. That's what Russia wants the world to know. That's how Russia is going to use their ability to use chemical weapons on the Ukrainian people. That is treasonous. That is. I go back to a former candidate on the Republican side, Mitt Romney, for the common sense of what he said about her. If you go out anywhere in social media, if you go out anywhere in your news articles, you're going to find that Mitt Romney went after Gabbard. I mean, that he was the one that stepped forward and used words like treasonous. Because it is. She was a Democrat. He's a Republican. He's calling her out. Good. That is good for all of us. This is Vladimir Putin's war. He's trying to sell it as though the Ukrainian people want him to be there. They want him to do this. They don't want him to do this. They're fighting him in the streets with inferior weapons, and yet they're still taking him on with their lives. And so when you've got a former congresswoman who served in the military, you have to really question whether or not she has the decency even to be heard. And you're going to say, well, why are you giving her a voice by even talking about her? Because there's more like her. Don't fall into that trap. Don't do it. Collectively, we need to go forward when it comes to the issue in Ukraine. All right, good riding with you, folks.